going to go ahead and get started. And well, first I want to thank everyone for joining our Heritage Farm Wetland Restoration Project open house. But I do want to let everyone know that this is a recorded meeting. The chats won't be recorded and the cameras won't be recorded, but the presentation and the audio will be recorded. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and post the presentation on our project website here in the next couple of days. We do have Robin Washington, who is the project manager and will be leading this presentation today. Also, something to keep in mind, we'll have a question and answer session after the presentation has concluded. So as you can tell, everyone who is in attendance here is muted. But once we go to our question and answer session, you'll be able to raise your hand virtually and a host will unmute you. Also, we have a chat feature. So if you do think of a question during the presentation, you are also able to go ahead and type up a question and send it through. And one of the members from Public Works will be able to answer that question, or we can read it aloud after the presentation is over. The meeting is scheduled to go up until 6:30. I don't anticipate it going very long, but I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are considerate of everyone's time. So we will adhere to that time frame and we will not go past the 6:30 mark. Also, email addresses will be provided at the end of the presentation and will be available on our project website. And here in the next couple of days, I will also be emailing a Title VI and a comment form for everyone who has joined us, and those forms are voluntary. And we'll go ahead and let you get started, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you for showing up tonight. I appreciate it. We're here to talk about Heritage Farm Wetland Restoration. It's out at the Clark County Heritage Farm, of course. On the line, we have some staff who will answer questions towards the end, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. Stephanie, are you out there? Can you unmute?
I'm John Millen. I'm working with Stephanie on the design of the project.
Marley, are you?
I'm Marley Milosevic. I'm Marley Milosevic with Clark County Clean Water, and I'm in charge of administering the grant for this project.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Schnabel with the Clean Water Division, Stormwater Infrastructure Manager for the county and the client for this project.
Hello everyone, my name is Pam Shenzi. I'm the mitigation specialist for Clark County and I will be coordinating all of the environmental permits that are required.
Hi, my name is Lindy Wallach and I'm the planner for Parks and Lands.
And finally, I'm Rocky Houston. I'm the Parks and Lands Division Manager, and I oversee the management of this site.
Thank you. And you've all seen the site out here off of 78th. This is what it looks like now, currently. Now, you may have heard of this project before, probably have. It was part of the master plan discussions. The master plan calls for the enhancement of the creek corridor. The wetland areas and existing creek crossings will be maintained and used to access the interpretive trail, the orchards, and the agricultural fields. Getting used to this program here. The purpose of this is a lot of words. The purpose of this project is to restore the headwater wetlands by creating a series of shallow wet cells along the existing channel to promote infiltration, raise the groundwater elevation, and improve the wetland hydro period. The project will try to restore as much as possible the natural function of this headwater wetland located in Cougar Creek sub-watershed of the Salmon Creek watershed In doing so, it will probably oh, shoot. Okay, let's go down here to where John says something very quick and easy. The project site will basically get much wetter, and it will have much more wetland vegetation in the lower area, more like it was in its natural condition. That's what all those words meant. Usually don't read all that stuff. The benefits to this project will increase the groundwater, enhance summer stream flow, improve overall water quality, and reduce summer water temperatures in Cougar Creek. Cougar Creek, as you know, flows into Salmon Creek. Thus, the improvements made here will also have a benefit to Salmon Creek. Here's our schedule as we have it today. It is pretty close to what we intend to really happen out there because we have to meet permits and granting agencies' requirements. Construction is currently scheduled for spring of 2024, which is a couple of years from now. The project costs. The costs right now are about 1.4. We have Department of Ecology grant for $500,000. We have a grant, and that is what's motivating us right now because we have money to use. And we have the Clean Water Fund that's contributing over $900,000. This budget probably won't remain the same. As we know, when you're doing a project at home, budgets don't stay the same. They go up, they go down. Mostly they go up. Here we are. Here's the project. I'm going to have to slightly come out of this mode. It's not going to let me do it. Sorry. Can't point in that. Oh, there we go. And here we are. As you can see here, we have vegetative area that is planted. It's about 35 feet wide. Both sides. This backside here is my understanding that we will have some vegetation. Doesn't look like we can get to 35 feet in there. As you see, we have your existing driveways and a connection, which is gravel. We have the split rail fence on each side of this gravel driveway. That's your west. This is the easterly one. To keep the connection going. This easterly driveway here exists currently and it will remain. It will be 14 feet wide also. And it will have about 8-foot shoulders on each side. Now, this isn't set in stone. We still have to talk to our permitting agencies. And so it might change slightly, but it's probably pretty close to what we're going with. One of the notes down here is saying that the existing sanitary sewer will have to be moved for a couple of reasons. We don't want to hit it and destroy it. And we don't want them later having to come back in here for some reason and repair that pipe and have to destroy the wetland along the way. So we're going to move it outside the wetland up here. We have the weather stations out here. We know the tower needs a 50-foot buffer. So we have a buffer around it. And the other weather stations, we're working on getting the number for that to make sure that we maintain the buffer. And just a little closer picture for you, showing the weather station location and the 14 feet wide gravel driveway in both locations. And that's subject to change. We might decide we want a 12 and 16. We don't know. This is why we're here tonight to discuss things. and see where we go from here. This is the easterly end Ave. Again, the driveway is still there. And during construction, we will make sure to maintain access to the south side. You may not have two driveways during construction, but you will have access to the south side. We'll make sure that you still get over there. That is something that our designers will work with our specs to make sure it happens. This is telling you that what I've already said, that you have 14 feet wide gravel, 14 feet on the easterly one with both shoulders in grass. Here's where we're going. See, you have kind of little shelves going down here and lots of planting. In 2015, this is what it looked like right after they planted. So we probably will look similar. 4 years later, lush, beautiful. That's where we're going. And I will go back to any slide that you want to go back to, so don't worry. This is the first and last time you get to see this. I'm retiring. I'm gone in 4 days. So Rocky and Lindy will still be around and you can contact them. There are others that you can also contact, but these will be your main contact for now. I had a few questions come in, so I thought I'd throw them up here to make sure that everybody could probably think about these. Sometimes one person asked the question and several people had the same questions. So I'm going to throw it out here, and I'm not going to read all of these words. I'm going to paraphrase. Is a trail segment planned along the wetland restoration so the community can access this wetland for educational and nature experience? That is not part of this project. That is not the focus of this project. The trail is a separate project that is not funded as part of this project. What projects or areas will be impacted by this project during construction and after? That's why we're here. We want to know what your needs are and try to figure out how this is going to all go together. And it says at this phase of the project, we do not have all the answers, but we're willing to listen and hear your questions so that we can come back with thought out answers of how we're going to get this done. Have all the stakeholders been notified about this project and the open house? As to my knowledge, we've sent it out to the Heritage Farm Advisory Team and several other locations. But if you know of someone, some organization that we missed, let us know so we can get them involved. We want everyone to be involved. What is the herbicide being sprayed along the Cougar Creek? The bamboo. I don't know. I have never asked the question. I did forward the question on to Parks and Lands, and they will look into it and get an answer out. I'm gonna see here. What partners will help with the riparian buffer? Basically, the current plan is to have the contractor plant and manage the plantings. And mostly, it's just easier to control that way. This is wetland restoration tied to any other development. This is a standalone project. Any future development will require its own permitting and review for stormwater, wetland, etc., etc. All righty. So I guess we're opening it up for questions. I'm going to go back to the plan here.
Thank you, Robin. So it looks like Christine Perry has a question. I'm going to go ahead and request that you unmute.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I just had a question about the different types of plantings that you had in mind. Is there a plan to have, I guess, what variety of plantings, or are they going to be mostly all native plants? I guess what's the type of plantings that are going to be put around the buffer areas? If I guess if you know that or not. Thank you.
Pam, do you know that?
I don't know if I know specifically. I know we are going to do a combination of, they will be native, the plantings will be native, but it'll be a combination of shrubs and trees. And I believe we will have some emergent plants in the wettest part of the wetland areas.
That's
When we move to the 65%, we will have a planting plan that will identify all that as we move closer to those details.
perfect. Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone that this is an opportunity to raise your hand, and you can do so virtually, and we'll go ahead and call on you to ask any further questions. All right, looks like Heather has a question.
So, in looking at the map that Robin has up here on the screen share, and looking at the northeast corner of the property, how does this wetlands restoration project impact what might be done with the northeast corner of the property in terms of the master plan for Heritage Farm? Does it create some constraints to what can happen there, or in terms of runoff or whatever? I'm just curious about how this impacts the possibility options on the northeast corner.
Thank you, Heather. This is Rocky. It's a good question, and one that it's really hard to articulate 100% at this level. So, not knowing exactly what's going to be done and what the permitting requirements would be at that point, you know, we can't do it, answer it completely. But what we do know is that we are working with the county for the permitting process to identify what level of wetland this will be considered, and then what those setbacks would be, as well as whether our current 35-foot buffer would meet those setbacks. So I think we're aware of and considering the future development in that area, but at the same time, this project doesn't have the scope to be able to identify and ameliorate any of those potential unknowns in the future.
Thank you. We also got a question. Do you have any other visuals, like on slide 9 at 30% of what will be happening during the other phases at 65 or 90%?
If I may, this is Rocky again. So we only have the 30% plans that are in front of you here. We have some black and white versions as well in that plan spec, but we have not created the 65% or the 95%. Taking the information we gather here and through this process, that's what will inform the design team in developing those 65% plans, where then we would actually go for permitting. And then after that's done, we'd complete the 90% in the final pack and go out to bid.
And
think
it
also,
look-
can I say
Sorry,
for
go ahead.
for that question, it looks like the question may be thinking of 65, 90% as being phases of construction, and these are design phases.
Good catch.
And it looks like John also had a question, so I'm going to go ahead and request that. John, unmute.
Thanks. I don't know what's going on with my hand raising function. I couldn't figure that out. I'm the caretaker for the weather station. I just wanted to make sure I dropped in tonight to try to understand what the plan for vegetation planting might be around the weather station. We do have a exposure requirement for the weather station to ensure that we're getting the most accurate wind measurements. We need about a 10-to-1 ratio between the nearest tallest object and the weather station itself, meaning that if a nearby tree is 30 feet tall, we would need it to be about 300 feet from the station. Didn't occur to me when it was first being proposed, and I was kind of thinking, okay, they're going to restore wetlands. Okay, I wasn't sure what that meant at first, but then it occurred, oh, they might be planting trees. I better follow up on this. Is there anyone that, whoever is designing this, is there someone I could chat with about potentially how it could be designed to ensure that we didn't have to move the weather station?
Yeah, this is Rocky. If you can send me your contact information, if we don't already have it, we will have someone follow up with you to get those specifics that you're referencing. I know we were trying to reach out and making sure we were worried about setbacks more than the that height issue that you just brought up. So that is a design element that we'll need to review to make sure we're in compliance.
And Robin, maybe if you can go to that slide with Rocky's contact information.
John, if you could reach out to me, something I'm actually working on was reaching out to the people who are involved with that. This is Lindy Wallach, by the way.
Thanks. 1 second, I'll just copy these things down.
And it looks like Sue has a question as well.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks. So Rocky, you mentioned that depending on the classification of the wetland would determine how many feet the buffer would be required. So I was wondering how do you figure that out? What are the parameters that this wetland and what are the various buffer widths that could apply?
Thanks for the question. Part of that is dependent upon community development's review and their categorization of that. To further answer that, sorry, I'm saying a lot. I apologize. Can I get Pam to respond?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So the Department of Ecology has a procedure for rating wetlands. So if you were to go to their website and just look up the wetland rating system, you could see what criteria we look at, what has to be, evaluated to determine what the rating is of that wetland. And it can be, the best rating would be a category 1 all the way down to a category 4. And the buffer distance on that wetland does vary between what category we're dealing with and also what the actual proposal is, what the project is. So, if we're putting in a lot of impervious surface and it's a category 2 wetland, that's going to create a higher buffer than even if it were a category 2 wetland with like a project that didn't have impervious surface right up to it. So those are the things that get factored into that. And that will be we'll be doing, we did actually evaluate the current wetland, and I believe it was a category 4. So we will definitely be shooting for a much higher category wetland when all this is done. But the buffer could be as low as 40. I think that's the minimum. I think it could go as high as 200 or more if we had the highest quality wetland. So somewhere probably in between would be my guess at this point, but it's speculation at this point.
And this is Rocky again. I think the other thing that we're trying to identify is we're enhancing this wetland. And so as through that process, as a land manager, I'm trying to understand, do we get some credit for that in regards to what those setbacks are? We may not, but again, as we're trying to ask those questions to again understand what those are, and if we are within a setback, then there are mitigation measures and other things for future development to offset if we're inside that buffer. So again, there are options pursuant to the rules that are out there.
That leads me to a follow-up question about the uncertainty of the northeast corner. If there would be potentially a lot of impervious surface there, how that interaction would work with the wetland, or if maybe it's mitigation that would have to happen at that point.
Correct. If we were going to develop a parking lot there, which I believe is what's in the master plan, then we'd have to review the stormwater needs. We'd have to review that and look at many factors at that point. And there's, like any good engineer says, time and money can solve all the world's problems. But again, we don't always have all the time and money out there.
That's what engineers say.
Right. But we're looking at it and trying to be informed as we move forward and advocate the best we can to not have impacts beyond any wider than they are, and that's on the agricultural side as well as on the north side there. So it's.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a question. Will the community have the ability to provide or give good input on what kind of native plants, shrubs, and trees will be put in?
Pam, can you answer that one in regards to the permitting process and design?
Sure. Let me think about that one for a minute. I know when we're, we'll have to do, I believe we'll have to do the SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act checklist, and that does get public noticed. So there would be an opportunity for the public to comment on that. That might be the only comment period for the permitting process would be through that SEPA documentation.
Thank you. And will native food producing plants be in the mix of what's planted?
That's a great question. I don't think that's one thing that we've been considering at this moment, but we can put that in consideration as we are selecting those plants. Sometimes the regulators have a list of plants that we're working from, and I don't know what that list is, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, those are all of the questions. Chat. I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. Oh, Sue has a question.
Thank you. Just following up on the SEPA notice, how would one get that notice? I know sometimes it's just so many feet around where the project is going to be happening, but given that this is Heritage Farm and there's, community-wide interest in the property, how can one get access to that SEPA, and how many days might there be to comment on that?
That's a good question. I don't know if Cindy or Pam, would the website be the location where people would look, or is that going to go to community development? So I'm asking the questions just as you are, ma'am, as being new.
I know it does go on the website. I guess I don't know exactly, and maybe Cindy knows more specifically about that, but I know it's on the website. It goes in the newspaper, typically the Columbian, and the Reflector, I believe, is the other one. And it's a 14 calendar day, if I get that right, 14 calendar day comment period.
Yeah. And I go ahead and post that on the website. There's a clark.wa.gov, Public Works, and then /SEPA, and all of our notices on there. And yes, it is the 2 weeks. And then there's where to address all of your comments to.
Would there be could someone sign up to be noticed of that?
I don't know what community developments signups are for those sort of notices. I don't believe we have that that currently as an option for our notification process. We will make sure that at the farm and the advisory team all have this information as well, and they can distribute it through their networks as well.
Thank you.
This is David. Sue, are you part of the farm advisory team or a partner at the farm?
Just a sec.
Sue, did you hear my question?
Yes, I did. I couldn't unmute there for a while.
That's okay.
I'm not on the advisory team, but there is just an ad hoc stakeholders group that formed, oh gosh, maybe 2 years ago. And I know that group includes a lot of the people who participate and then just the community at large. But there's about 20 different organizations that participate in that.
Sue,
Maybe you could just put me on the list.
if
and
you
I'd
could
get it out.
if you could just send your contact information to Lindy.
Lindy.
She's our primary contact, and Rocky and I are supporting her. And this project somewhat informs our business and master plan moving forward. And so we're very involved, and we'll have ways that we're reaching out to various interested parties and stakeholders. So if you can just make sure that Lindy has your contact information, that would be great.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you. We do have another question on the chat. Can you please help clarify what all the colors mean on the diagram? Seems like it's a little hard to read. I don't know if you're able to zoom in a little bit, Robin, and then maybe explain what the colors mean on there.
Yeah, I can try to help explain the colors the best I can. I agree. It's a I think I need glasses moment. I'm looking at this. So, so the green. So when you look in the middle of the blue, so you see the blue band that goes around the perimeter. That identifies the 35-foot vegetated buffer for the wetland buffer that is going to be developed. And then when you look into the middle, you'll see little pink lines and little green lines. The green lines are elevation lines. So those, I believe, are 1-foot elevation lines. And the pink lines are kind of showing you kind of where the pools are. So if you're thinking of it at the high point over here on the east side, is you're going to have a first little pool. It'll drop down a couple feet. There'll be a much larger pool settling area that's wide there. Then it necks down to a little spot and drops down. And then when you come to the first ladder looking thing in red, so that's the road crossing. So that will be open during construction, one or the other, but that will remain open. So that culvert that's there currently will remain in some fashion, and we'll have this crossing there. And then as you move forward, you'll see those green lines and pink lines. The red dotted line that you see going through the middle of all that, that is the sewer line that was referenced that needs to be moved. So that's going to be moved to the south, I believe is where it's going, to be outside of the middle of that drainage in case in the future they have to dig it up to have fewer element components. And I believe the blue we'll call it hex check line, again, is that sort of the wetland or the high water, sort of that buffer zone as well. Team, did I miss any of the key features in the diagram?
It looks like the red line is what the question was about that they were trying to figure out. So we heard what it was about. So thank you so much for that. It looks like
Just as a point of clarification, I believe the sewer line is being moved to the north. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. It's on the north.
Yeah, the green dash, the green solid line. Sorry, Rocky. I just knew that it was going to run right along the back of the existing shop and along the edge of the parking lot. So the south edge of the original parking lot.
Good. Thank you. I made that mistake on purpose.
You want to see if I was sleeping?
No. No, thank you. That is good. Appreciate that.
Let me go back to the contact information. Some of our participants, and it looks like Heather has a question.
There we go. So can Robin or whoever is doing screen share put that first map back up? The print is so small, but I think it says that right now on that on the map, it's a 35-foot buffer. Is that correct? And
Give me 1 second. I just need to know if the person who needed the contact has the information they need.
Yeah, you can go ahead and switch. I'm gonna send it through the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, that is a 35-foot vegetated buffer.
all right, so I guess maybe this is a question for Pam. So that 35-foot buffer, is that associated with a category 1 or a category 4 wetland?
That's a good question, and the answer is none of the above. That is something that is required by the Department of Ecology because of the grant. They wanted to see a 35-foot buffer around the wetland restoration area. So it's completely separate from the wetland, I guess the other wetland buffer we can kind of view as the regulated buffer area around the wetland, where, if we were doing any activities within there, any disturbance, we would have to get permits for that work and potentially mitigate, like Rocky had mentioned earlier. So they're a little bit different in this case.
So Pam, if all goes as envisioned and this wetland gets restored to a category 1 wetland, what would that buffer look like? 250 feet? Is that what you said?
I would have to double check the code. It would not only depend on the wetland category, but what the actual project was, as we mentioned earlier, and the kind of the amount of disturbance or the amount of impervious surface next to it. That would mean we would have a larger regulated wetland buffer area. So it doesn't necessarily mean we can't do anything. It just means it's regulated and we would have to get permits for any of our work and mitigate any impacts. We would still have to minimize or avoid our impacts, but if we can't, then we'd go through that regulatory process for approval.
So if a 250-foot buffer ended up being required, that's like what's 35, 70, that's like three to four times bigger buffer than what's pictured here. Did I do the math right on that?
If it was a 250-foot buffer, it would probably be all the way out to 78th Street, correct?
Okay.
But if we had a project in there, we'd just have to go through the process and determine what we could do through mitigation or design to minimize that setback.
All right. Thank you. That helps.
This is David. Just to sort of further complicate an already complicated issue, there are two different sets of setbacks in the Clark County Critical Areas ordinance. One of them is for habitat protection, habitat project protection, and one of them is for water quality project protection. And so we're still, as an agency, working through that conversation with the funding partners and the regulatory agencies. And it's a it's a topic that Rocky and Lindy and I are sort of keenly interested in. So we're glad to hear that there's some interest on the public's part as well. There are also a number of tools in the critical areas code for sort of buffer adjustments, using averaging and those sorts of things. And we're working hard to make sure that the project is beneficial and not overly cumbersome.
Thank you. There's a question if whether there's a website that has an outline of the changes, maps of changes, and some explanation on of how this will affect the neighboring properties. Well, our project website, Heritage, or it's clark.wa.gov Public Works Heritage Farm Wetland Restoration, will have this presentation. And also, Robin, if you can send PDF copies of those to me, I can go ahead and upload those on the project website. To answer Ken's question. There's a question as well about the parking lot in the front of the main building. Will that be affected?
This is Rocky. So the parking lot on the south end of the property there will not be impacted. So this is separate, and there will be no changes or modifications to that, is my understanding. And impacts to neighbors. This project is designed to only be in the footprint of Clark County property. The impacts would be beneficial in regards to the water quality, the water temperature, and those elements downstream for it, as well as, you know, having a properly working wetland like this will be create capacity. So if there are high water events, again, this provides additional capacity. Of course, Cougar Creek goes into a culvert, as I recall, and it goes under 78th to the north, and then it daylights again. So beyond our property, it goes underground.
Also, I think you meant the parking lot on the west side, not the south side.
Yes, thank you. I'm directionally challenged tonight, but it's on my right. No, that's my left.
Thank you, Rocky. Will the plantings occur directly in the wetland or in the wetland buffer, or both? And is there no buffer needed on the northwest side by the parking lot?
Good questions. So as Pam had talked about earlier, there will be emergent species in the wetland area. Most of the plantings will be in that buffer, that 35-foot area, as sort of showing here. You can't really see it, but on the far right-hand side, you'll see that you don't see a lot of water. You see some greenery there that's down in there. So that's what that emergent area is. The existing parking lot is and I think it was discussed earlier, is there isn't space for the buffer. And so again, the design and the proposal is set up to where there'll be a small vegetative buffer, but there won't be that 35-foot, again, to maximize the wetland area and minimize any impacts to the south, if I've got south right this time, to the agricultural property.
Thank you. Other than the wetland development and parking, what is the 5, 10, 20 plan for Heritage Farm? Year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year.
Yes, I said I was going to assume that was a 5, 10, and 20-year plan. So our document that we have currently to sort of do that 5, 10, and 20-year is the master plan in 2010 and the one that was updated in 2018. We're currently working on a business plan, which is going to influence the master plan. So we're working on that currently. Hopefully by the end of 2022, we'll have that business plan. That's in partnership with the Metro Center, which is a section of Washington State University. We're working with our partners on those things, more on the bigger picture of the farm and how it's going to operate. But So that will be determined in the future.
Okay, thank you. Or any other questions in the chat? So we're just waiting. Is there a current master plan?
Yes, there is an adopted master plan from 2010, and we did go through the process and develop a draft master plan in 2018. And off the top of my head, I can't recall if that was actually adopted or not. I know there was some questions about it, and which has sort of led us to our business planning right now.
And where did you say it can be found?
That is a great question. I don't know if that is on our website currently. If it's not, we can get that updated. I apologize. I don't have that at my fingertips.
It's okay. We'll go ahead and add it to this project website.
The master plan from April 2010 is on the website, but I don't think 2020 or 2018.
Thank you, Lindy. So it is on our website there. So if you went to the Parks division page and click the Heritage Farm link, you'll find it there.
Perfect, thank you. Questions? Oh, Heather has a question. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, one more question, having to do with the public engagement plan for this project. Will this, once you've got all the information you need about what the buffer might, that the actual buffer zone that's being proposed and which plants are being proposed and around the SEPA analysis that will have to happen, what's the public engagement plan look like going forward around all those potential points of interest to the public? Is there a public engagement plan already in place for this project? Or, yeah, I'm just curious about what that looks like going forward after this evening.
Sure, that's a great question, Heather. I believe that this project was following the standard public works public engagement process. So this open house would be that key point for gaining a lot of that information. Beyond that, I'll turn it over to Cindy to describe the communication strategy we have for this project beyond this tonight.
Great, thanks. Well, typically we try to make sure that our public is informed at 30, 60, and 90%. So I do anticipate that we will have another open house later on, probably closer to next year. It looks like we'll be at 90% by in May, so we still have a lot of time. We'll definitely have another open house around May next year, and we'll send a heads up notice again to the neighborhood, informing them prior to construction. So you'll see at least another 2 heads up going out, just like you received one in the mail today. So another open house and then one prior to construction.
Thank you, Cindy. Well, I want to thank everyone for your questions and participation tonight. If there aren't any further questions we have, of course, you can communicate with Lindy or myself via the emails that will be out. You'll be able to go to the website if you don't write those down tonight and get those off the project page. And just a small correction is that'd be 65% on this project versus the 60% is sort of that key thing. That's when we submit the permits, and then we get direction on how we need to change it based off of the regulators for that 90%, which should be that moment in next May.
Thank you so much, Rocky, and thank you everyone for joining us. I will be sending out those comment forms in a Title VI. And then again, this open house was recorded, so you can also go back and check our project website for the recording here in the next couple of days.
Cindy, this is David Stipe. One last comment. If you're interested in being on a contact list, please make sure you provide the information, your contact information to Lindy, and she'll start compiling a contact list. And when we start working on the business plan, we will be working with our communications folks, but we will be putting together a public outreach plan for that project. And we'll make sure that the contact information is put forward for the future projects at Heritage Farm. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, everyone.